All right, Jerry and Jana, appreciate you guys being here. You guys, it's an honor to have my friends here on the podcast. We got Jerry Tindell and Jana Tindell on here, and these are fellow mule and horse and donkey enthusiasts. We kind of have similar lives. We teach and help, and do the best we can. So, anyways, you two, thanks for being here this morning, and we should have been recording it already because we already give Jerry some crap about not even knowing what a podcast is. Getting him up to date. But anyways, Jerry, you might enjoy it. You might even find something you like on there.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to visit with us this morning, and it's always a pleasure to chat with you. And like you said, we all have like interest, and but maybe I was a little bit confused because I have done pond casting. I used to fish pond, but I don't know if that's probably not the same.
Hey,
You
that's
dropped it
even
in.
that's
Oh,
even better.
oh,
Pond casting. Yeah, that's even funner than this.
oh, I'm familiar with that, but I've never done a podcast before. But anyway, we sure appreciate being here and chatting about the things we like.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have you. So, what are you guys up to today? You just getting ready to ride here as soon as I stop bugging you?
We got a day off today. We've had some students here and been working all last week and through the weekend. So we're going to take the day off, and we've got some admin work to do. And it was a perfect timing to get to visit with you. So you caught us having coffee and visiting.
Perfect. Well, that's good.
He
I'm glad I
says,
didn't take away from riding.
yeah, he says a day off, but it's a day off or the stock. We don't, you know how that goes, right? So we'll have
I,
things to catch up, but they get a day off.
I call these are the real work days though. Like when
Yeah.
you got to go do all the computer crap and you got to do all the nobody
Yes.
thinks about all the office work. Like we do, we got our website and we got videos and you guys have the same thing and everybody pictures us just riding around all day. And
Yeah.
that is the dream, right? That would be great.
Yes.
But a lot of times we're riding a desk chair, putting videos on a computer. So
Yes.
that's not near as fun.
Yeah. Do you guys handle all that on your end?
Yeah.
You have, yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. It's definitely not the fun part of the job, but it's the necessary part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
But
The farther I go into this, the more challenging it gets to prioritize time to ride my own animals. I don't know if that
yeah,
happens to you guys too, but my father-in-law, he gave me a great word of advice a long time ago. Um, he said, ride your own first. And this is when I was training for the public, and I had 20 or 30 in and me and Sky were just going. And he said, you got to ride your own first, because if you don't, you get to the end of the day and your mule will be sitting there and you'll be like, I'm just too tired. But if you ride your own first, I'm a man of integrity. So at the end of the day, I'm going to ride the client mule for sure.
yeah,
So that was a
yeah.
good piece of advice.
That is a good way to look at it. But we it's tough. It's tough when you ride for the public. It's tough when you ride outside stock and you have your own and like you said, making the time for your own, but at least we're riding something.
It's fun. I don't know what else we'd do.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be terrible if we had to get a real job. My mother still wants me to get a real job.
I remember when I told my dad that I was going to stop going to school. And, I had gone to school for quite some time, just making it through life, right? Taking a little bit of classes here and there because I didn't really like it and, doing all that. And finally told him, I'm like, I'm just going to go and see whatever kind of degree I can get with all the classes I've taken. And I'm going to go and I want to ride horses for a living. That's what I want to do. And he was so, it wasn't that he was disappointed, but he goes, oh, I just worry. He's like, I worry you're going to be broke all your life. And I said, yes, but I will be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the problem with that?
Yeah, exactly. So they're very academic in that sort, but they know that I'm happy and they think of, how hard we work every day. And so that translates for what they do. They're hard workers. So.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, when Sky and I got married, or we were about to get married, I said, "Now, you do realize that I'm a mule trainer, right? Like you understand this whole deal." Luckily, she did, because that's what her dad did too. So her dad and my dad both, rode colts for a living. So
okay.
it was pretty easy for her to accept that.
Yeah,
Just so you know, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
anyways, but so you guys got all kinds of stuff going on. You guys got students coming and going. You're riding for the public. You got clinics. You got videos. You got your online program. You guys sound about like me with a million ways to go here. So, let's tell us a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I'm fortunate to have Jana on board because she brings in that part of the computer stuff that I'm not very familiar with, and booting up here is not a computer term, but I've been very fortunate to be around these horses and mules my whole life. My daddy was he loved to log for a living, so he skidded with mules and horses, and I kind of got on the tail end of that. And then we had him growing up, and I came to California to shoot horses with my brother, and traded horses and trained and did all those things. And it's just been a lifestyle that I've done it long enough to where now I really appreciate it, and appreciate all of the things that it brings to us. But we have a full board thing here. We train outside horses. We do our own when we can. Miss Jana shows quite a bit. She just did well in the skills of the rancho with her bridle mule, and we're just having fun. I think the enjoyment is sharing that knowledge that I've learned over a lifetime to help people and help the stock. And I really have a good feeling today when I'm working with someone or working with those animals. I feel that I'm far enough along that, hey, I can help. I've developed a little bit of a skill set here that I appreciate, and I've worked hard to understand it. And I tell you, it's a pretty neat feeling, and we've just done it long enough that I appreciate it, and I'm fortunate I get to do it every day.
Yeah, that is a
Yeah.
blessing, isn't it, to be able to do this every day?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
It really is. So, hold on. You mentioned, Jana, you just did skills of the rancho? Is that what you called that?
Yeah, the
I don't know
early
what that is.
skills. So it's the early skills of the rancho. So it's an event here in California in Parkfield. And the California Bridle Horse Association puts it on. And this was their 10th year. And so it started out more as like 2-man and 3-man doctoring teams, and really professional ropers who would go and rope and have kind of like the pro-am and things like that. And it's kind of turned into a teaching opportunity. So they have professionals, the professional ropers and horsemen, all different level, all different, from all different fields, right? There's Dwight Hill, there's oh goodness, of course I blank on names, right?
That's all
Justin.
right. That guy's pretty cool. So his name is great.
Yeah, Dwight works. Yeah, he's the super, and that's kind of how I got into it. It was because of Dwight, because we went to a class with him a couple years ago, and then they do it and all that. Anyways, so what they do now is they have different levels for advanced, novice, and intermediate, and then they have the bridle, the 2-rein, and the hackamore, and you're paired up with your pro, and the pro could have 10 people in different divisions. And then you have to, there's a stock horse, so you rope a cow. You have to do herd work, a pattern, and a roe deer roping. And then you have 2 other classes, like an alley sort and a roe deer roping, that are like standalones. So, but it's all about educating the participants, being there to help them, guide them do better, and then traditional California style riding with the bridle horse and the hackamore and all that. So it's a pretty neat event.
Oh, heck yeah. That sounds like a good time.
Yeah,
We need,
it was fun.
yeah. We need more of that kind of stuff here in Utah. We don't we don't got a lot of that kind of stuff. We there's a lot of ranch ropings and things like that, you know.
Correct.
That's pretty common, but there's not a lot of that like what you're talking about. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
So how'd it go?
Good. It went well. Yeah, I was pretty pleased. I mean, I did novice because I'm not a big roper. I don't rope a lot. I don't have a ton of practical skill with it. Like not practical skill, like I just don't use it in my everyday work, right? We work the horses and mules with it, but it's different. You're not roping a cow or
Oh
laying
yeah.
them down or so I did novice because it was my first time doing it, and which was nice because it took a lot of stress off of it being for me, because I hold a higher standard for myself. And it was nice because it was all breakaway and I only had to do heads. I didn't have to heel anything. And, when you break away, if you catch something,
You're locked on.
Well, yeah, you're locked on if you got a hard rope, but if you got that breakaway rope, no problem. I'll throw it all
Yeah,
day long.
it's non-committal.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
There's a way out. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I think
But
when you start roping, you should, I mean, like, when my students that come, if they want to learn how to rope, they have to breakaway rope. Like, I mean, hundreds
right.
of them, like
Yeah.
just so many, because it's a different story when you're attached. And then people
Yeah.
panic and then ropes go, everywhere.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, though, roping sure tells you a lot about your mulemanship, doesn't it?
It does.
Like your
Yeah.
horsemanship. I mean, that it really tells you where you're lacking or where you're doing good. I mean, yeah, I think I got a good stop and a good backup. And then, you go to a branding or something. You're like, well, I think I need to work on that.
Yeah.
It can get Western in a hurry.
Yeah. We teach in the clinics, all about like collection and, engagement, blah, 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 all these things, right? I tell you what, you learn if you really have it. Like I had one mule that I had healed a calf, and I was just trying to, it was a heavy calf. It was pretty heavy, no doubt. And I was just trying to back up, and I was even sliding rope to help this mule engage, and get back. And I could just feel that mule only using its front end. Like you might as well just cut it off behind the wither, because it wasn't using its butt at all. You're like, okay, we got work to do. I cannot get back on this thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you should learn a lot when you rope, don't you?
You
Yeah.
do. Yeah, it was
It's
pretty
a nice event.
it was a super nice event. Very just a lot of like-minded people there, and it was really special for me because I took my little mule that I've had for a couple years now, and I rode him in the bridle, and I mean, I've ridden him in the bridle a couple times, but it was basically maybe 3 weeks before, and he did spectacular. He was so good, so quiet, did everything I could ask for. So
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. How do these folks, these other participants and things, how do they like the mules coming in?
So there was one other mule there, and he was riding in a hackamore and stuff, and then they love it. They think it's the greatest thing, and especially when they're good,
When
right?
they do well, yeah.
Yeah.
When they don't, boy, it's a different story.
When they don't, it's always like, oh, there goes the mule.
Yeah, there's the mule. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you're doing really great, it's always like, oh, that's a nice mule. Wow. And
Oh
then,
yeah.
and then they always give, like, as the rider and the handle, oh man, like you feel like your head is, huge, because they're always so complimenting about how, tough they can be, and how, most people that ride horses or seen mules or been around, they know kind of what they're like. So it really feels good when they do well to represent the mule, as well as, just doing well with them, because they are such a great animal. But
as
yeah.
most people probably still today think the mule is a farm animal or should be pulling a plow or those sort of things. But they just, and thanks to, Stephen, the stuff you do, that you get it out all over the country, where people need to know the versatility and the talent of these animals. And the old saying about the mules being super tough, and
Stubborn.
And it's interesting, we ride with a good friend of ours, and Jana rides her mule, and he actually rode the mule. He said, this thing's really broke to ride. He was pretty impressed, but he said, so if you guys say these mules are so smart, why do they always do the wrong thing? It kind of made me think a little bit, and I'm thinking, I don't really know the answer to that, but they are super crafty and pretty clever, and they're thinking all the time. But I think a mule will do everything a horse will do. They'll just do it a little bit better.
Around here, if you're going to show up with a mule, like to a branding, you have to be twice as good. Because, okay, if you showed up to a branding, just on a young colt, a young horse, right? And you had some trouble, nobody would think twice about it. Like, he's just working the horse. Nobody would judge you, at least not me. Nobody would really care. They'd be like, oh, whatever, she's just working a horse. But if you show up on a mule and you had the same problems, you were getting judged like so hard, so you got to be twice as good. And then even your roping skills, you got to be twice as good of a roper, because if you show up and you're missing a bunch on a mule, you're being judged twice as hard. It's like, well, you just better be good, and
funny story. I went to a show at the beginning of this year, and I took we have two of our personal is a really nice quarter horse, and then my little red mule, and they're both named Maverick. But so I took the Mavericks to these shows, and my little red mule, he does real good, of course, when he goes by himself. But you take that horse or someone else, it changes a little bit, and he needs to get better with that stuff. I'm not trying to make, it's not an excuse for the horse, but so I took him and I showed him more. And then I had a class with the horse. So I tied up the mule and I went and did my thing, and I just left him at the trailer, and I come back and he is fit to be tied. Like, he is completely sweated out. He dug a hole to China. He was kicking the trailer. He was just having a fit, and everybody around him, oh, he's so cute. He's, oh, but he's so cute. I'm like, he's cute. I want to kill him. But, it's funny because you asked about the horses. So when you go to these horse shows and you have a mule, you kind of don't even, I feel, you don't even rate on their scale, because they're like, oh, it's just a mule or whatever. And so all these bad habits or all the good stuff, it's looked at totally different. But then you go to a mule show, and then you're just like everyone else. You're right there, but I'll just never forget that kick in the trailer.
Glass.
Yeah.
I should have instructed her a little better type, because all the years I showed in Bishop, what I learned to do, especially, and I took stuff, I didn't know how to train them. I didn't know that they were crazy. I didn't know anything in those days. And what I would do, and it was always people that I knew, but if I had mules that I weren't very impressed with, and I was going to leave them or I was going to do something else, I'd always tie them to their trailers.
That's what someone else's trailer.
and I'm walking around on one that's doing pretty good, and they say, hey man, you ought to see that mule Bill's got at his trailer. And it was a crazy one that I brought. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that one. That's a good one.
It was pretty good.
Now, my meals are fine. I don't know what's wrong with yours.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No.
So Jerry, tell me about Bishop Mule Days a little bit. In your showing days there, I've showed at Bishop, I don't know, maybe five different years or whatever, but haven't been for quite a while. In fact, the last time I was there was when we saw you guys there.
Right.
Yes, like 2017 or 18 or
easily
something like that. Anyways, but tell me about that, little Jerry, showing the Bishop.
Well, I got involved in the mules. As I said, my daddy kind of had them, so we grew up with them, and I liked them a lot. Didn't know a whole lot about them, but then I come to California and I got involved in, shoeing horses for a living. Is how I started out. And I was shoeing horses for a lady that had some pretty nice horses. And she said, hey, we took a mare up on pasture up in Fresno, and she's been up there for quite a while. And we went to visit her, and we don't know how it happened, but she's got a baby mule on her side. She says, we know you like mules. We'll give you that mule if you want it. I think, boy, I'll sure take it. So I go up there and I get this. He's probably a year old, never been touched out in a pasture. Luckily, there was a cow operation there, so we put him in a chute and brought him home. And I'll tell you what, that was the best educational mule I ever owned. And that thing, I didn't know anything in those days. And I tried showing this mule once I got to riding him, and it took me 6 months to get him to buck me off. I didn't know. I rode him, and I think, if you're a little bit tough, I'll ride you. I can make you get better. And in those days, I would probably push him a little harder, and that took him a while to figure out. I'm not going to put up with all this. But back to Bishop, I started taking him to Bishop. So in the early days, I've been there since the mid 70s. I've been going there that long, not showing in the early days, but so then I got to showing, and my daughter showed, and we showed everything from the hitch animals. I did all the chariot racing and the team roping, the team chariot race roping, and then I'd do some of the pleasure classes, and never did do much of the team roping, the actual event, but I did all the chuck wagon stuff, a lot of the driving competitions. And this mule taught me a whole lot, but in those days, it was different because they didn't really have any instructions. They didn't have any rules. Everything was just you drink and have a good time and hope you live through it. And, I don't drink at all. So luckily I was a little bit more sane, but it was quite an experience. And looking back at those days, I was doing things I had no clue what I was doing. And the neat thing about now is that they've got such a higher category where people are they're learning, they know what they're wanting to show, they're breeding good stock and getting good mules. And it's just probably the best of the best there. But I had a lot of fun at it and learned a whole lot in those days, but it's kind of how I got started.
Yeah, I've enjoyed Bishop. I had fun. It changed. My interest changed over the years. Yeah. When I first started going, I'd enter every fun class and figured out how to really screw my mules up.
Yeah.
Stand still to mount, except for right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And you run down there, all the goofy classes, the Dolly Parton race, and you jump off and you put the balloons in your bra and you run back. And anyways, you can really get one riled up there. But it was fun. But then towards the later on, I got more interested in the ranch classes and and all that kind of stuff. That was pretty fun. So anyways, but you've mentioned your dad a couple times, Jerry, and skidding logs and all that. That's one thing I have never done is skidded logs, and that kind of stuff. So where did you grow up before you moved out to California, and what was that?
Well, from a large family, there's 9 kids, originally from Missouri. We're 100 miles south of St. Louis. And my dad loved the logging business. And he kind of probably started out that way just as a job and survival and just making food for the family. But it was something he just had a huge passion for. And he loved the horses and the mules and the hitches. And so he got involved in that. And then, it was a very tough way to make a living in those days. And he would go get him a job somewhere and get a little bit better on his feet. And then back to the timber he'd go. He'd get some more teams and go back. But I remember we were on the tail end of that growing up because my twin brother and I were the babies of the whole band. So we grew up just at the tail end of it. But I still remember some of those rides and being young and being on those hitches and learning how to listen because, it was interesting. My dad could take horses or mules and horses, team them up, mix them up, the stallions, the mares. It didn't make any difference in those days. Today we look at a team and think they should be looking alike. They should be perfect and pretty. But those days, they needed to work. They needed those 2 animals to work side by side in sequence. And he could work horses with mules and studs with mares. And it was pretty phenomenal. But, and he taught us lessons about listening. But my dad could take and find a piece of timber that he wanted to cut, and he would walk those animals to that site. He would cut down the trees he wanted. Then he would take one trip from the tree to the truck, and they would hook them mules up, and they would drive that route from where the trees were to the truck to load them. once he did that, they never had to drive them mules again. They'd go back and forth on their own. I don't know how old I was, but I wasn't probably at a stage to listen. But my dad had a little gray mule, wasn't very big, and he would just hook little stuff to that mule. And so I kept telling my dad I wanted to ride that mule. He says, "You boys can't ride that mule. He's good to drive, but you can't ride him." So I kept thinking, well, he's the right size for me. I think I could ride him. Well, he's skidding logs, so he takes him back and forth. And about quarter of a mile from the truck, there was a little spot where this mule came through, and there was a log there about 1.5 feet off the ground. I'm thinking, that mule comes by there, I'm just going to jump on. Well, sure enough, I did. That thing come through there, and he's got a log behind him. Well, when I got on that mule, that thing took off, and he went so fast, the log he was pulling hit the stump I stood on. And I mean, he got back to the truck with nothing but the collar on.
Jeez.
And my dad always said, "You really don't have a wreck unless you got all your harness missing when you get there." Well, it was all gone but the collar. So now I'm panicked. I figure I got to send this mule back to get the next log. I'm looking for pieces of harness, and I'm trying to wire stuff back together. Well, it didn't work, but I got a pretty good schooling out of that. But it was quite an impressive thing to be at the tail end of that and to see that lifestyle. But it's pretty amazing how it works.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've never, like I said, I've never been around that, never done that. The only thing I've seen of it is just at some, like they got Mule Day in Tennessee, and that's one of their events is skidding logs and playing around with that. That's kind of neat, but that's pretty neat, Jerry. So what? So then you started shoeing some horses and some things, and I guess give me a little bit of a sequence of from the shoeing on to getting to California and then on to the clinics and things like how
it worked was, we fiddled with our own as kids. My daddy kind of got us to trimming feet, and we didn't know how to trim feet. He got us to put shoes on. We couldn't nail a shoe on, but we attempted to do all that. And looking back, it was such an education that I'm using today that I never even knew I was gaining. So through all that stuff, we just had fun with it. And then came to California. My older brother shod horses in El Monte here. And he told my twin and myself, he said, "When you boys graduate, I'm bringing you to California. I'll teach you to shoe horses." So he did that. The day we graduated, he picked us up. We come to California. So we start as soon as we get home, we start on the truck shoeing horses. Well, my twin brother, he was a little different. He was a little bit more educational driven, and he didn't shoe horses for very long, and he wanted to put himself through medical school, which he did. So I continued on the path of shoeing horses. And my brother had a good reputation. So, you kind of tag along with that as you start getting around the community and people know you, and then they know your brother. Now you're kind of somebody. And so my brother would say, "Hey, well, let Jerry take this horse home and work it for you. You can't shoe its feet. You can't get it in a trailer." And so I started out in those early days, I didn't know anything, but I knew more than the person that couldn't get along with them. So it just gave me that little bit of edge I couldn't get him in a trailer pretty, but at least I could get him in there. So I started that path, and then the shoeing led from one thing, and then I started training and trading. And I realized that, I could help these horses and send them home. But about a month after that, the people had the same problem again. Then I started saying, well, hey, let me help you do what I do, and started out that way. So I'm shoeing horses and running that whole career. And I started packing, started doing weekend trips in the mountains in the high Sierras. So I just have done this thing every day. Then shoeing horses, I knew a veterinarian that I worked a lot for. He said, "Hey, we need some horses fixed that are not moving very well for the Los Angeles Police Department." So he says, "Why don't you come over there and see if you could help them horses?" So I got involved in that organization, shoeing horses for the mounted patrol in LA. And then I worked there for quite a few years. And then through that process, I started helping horses that, there are a few of them that pulled back and a few of them that were difficult to shoe. When I first started shoeing, the guy said, "There's 3 horses out of 35 that we're going to need to tranquilize when you shoe them." So I went through the whole route, and I was busy and shoeing a lot of horses. I'd go there once a week, and the guy finally comes in the barn on a Monday morning. He says, "Oh, we're way behind. I got to get these 3 horses to you. I got to get them shod." And I looked at my list and I said, "I've already shod them." He said, "Well, you can't shoe them without tranquilizing them." But I'd already developed enough horsemanship skill through the shoeing process that I could get around a horse pretty easy. So that led me into helping this and that. And then I finally hired on as the police department as a trainer. And I trained police horses for quite a few years and enjoyed that a lot. But even as that started, I started helping the community work their horses. And the department would send me to do little talks for people and little things about the mounted unit and how it worked and what we would do with our horses and the process that we trained them. So pretty soon I started doing a few clinics here and there, and next thing I know, I'm pretty busy, and here I am today.
Man. So I want to go back to that mounted patrol a little bit. Like, so I mean, it takes a lot of, man, those got to be some good horses, and that's a lot of work to get them quiet enough and confident enough. What kind of stuff was you helping them with? I mean, like I've seen some of those horses that when they go through those riots and things like that, and they just plow through, right? I mean, how do you get those things so darn confident to do that?
Well, the thing that I brought to the unit the most was the horsemanship. I didn't really know how to train police horses, but I knew how to train horses. So I took that concept and I started seeing horses that they needed to get caught easier. And these were good street horses. You couldn't beat them. Once they got on the street, they had the job down pat. They were really the best of the best. But I noticed little things like trailer loading, little things like, they weren't comfortable in the barn. Maybe they're a little sassy around other horses. And so I brought to the horses the horsemanship side of softness. Once we started getting the horses soft, we started getting them supple, we started doing all of our basic maneuvers. That seemed to help the other things get better as we progressed. So the horsemanship was the first thing that I really brought to the unit before we did the job. The second thing that we worked on the most was evaluating a horse for that job description. I think today a lot of people, they buy a horse or get a horse or a mule and they say, I had one like this when I was a little kid. I'd like to have the same color. I'd like to have the same size. But you got to start thinking of temperament, trainability, and the job description you'd like to have your horse do. And we needed horses pretty bad through the years working that job. We would retire our good horses. And we looked at, in 1 year's time, I'm pretty safe to say we looked at over 60, 70 head of horses through a one ad. Someone would call us. The neighbor said they had a good horse. The barn down the road said they had a good horse. They said, we've got a good horse that would make a good mounted horse for your unit. So we would look at probably 60 head of horses a year. And that would be through a phone call, a conversation. Well, out of that number, we would probably start to look at 20, 25, a little bit deeper. Maybe the description fit the size and the color and the temperament. And then from there, we would probably physically go look at 10 to 12 head of horses. Out of those 10 or 12, we probably would ride 4 or 5. Out of that 4 or 5, we'd bring 1 or 2 to the barn, and hopefully we could buy 1 horse. Now, that doesn't say they weren't good horses. I'm just saying that they weren't the quality, they weren't the type of horse that we wanted for that particular job. And it took a very special horse to handle that stress and that type of ride. So the mounted unit was formed for 2 things. One was crowd control, and the other was crime suppression. The crowd control department was very limited. We used the horses and they were very effective, but they formed the unit in '88. And that time, there weren't a lot of calls for the mounted unit to go on just I lost my train of thought here, just for the crowd control. So then they implemented crime suppression. That meant that the horse is now the radio car. So instead of getting in the radio car to go do your job, You leave the barn, take your horse to the location, you ride your horse, you actually make a rest and those sort of things from horseback. So that's when the unit really started to make its point, which was through the crime suppression. So you could ride every day and do a job, or you could be called up in a special event on the crowd control. So it was just, I think it was the best unit in the country. I was very fortunate to work there and to be involved in that with being Metro. They were the best of the best, and worked with some of, was able to add some to the unit, but it took away a lot as well.
Yeah, that's pretty dang neat. To be part of that. That's pretty cool. I mean, I was just thinking about your comment about all the horses you'd look at on, you know, in the ads, and then how you narrow it down to one or two. And but that fits just about anything you want. Like, I mean, somebody looking for a riding animal, you know, it's kind of like that if they do a good job at it. One thing that I'm always trying to tell my students is not to buy the very first thing you see. You know, I probably like you, I get I mean, it seems like a million calls and emails about people looking for mules, and they'll get pretty excited about one, or they'll get a little anxious, like, oh, this is the one, I'm going to lose it, you know, and then they want to jump on it right away. And I'm a proponent. Hey, you need to go look at a lot of them. And I think especially, you know, I get a lot of the crossover, I guess, when somebody, maybe they had ridden horses, you know, their whole life, but they're interested in mules. And, you know, they're familiar with horses and conformations and dispositions and things, but they think mules are like this, you know, alien creature. And, you know, and so they better just buy the first one or whatever. I don't know, but they get a little excited. And I tell folks, you know, if you can just go be it around as many as you can to really find the fit, that's super important. I mean, do you run into that with a lot of your clients these days too? Is, you know, people just wanting to jump the gun and, hey, well, it's the same color, like you said, as when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So let's just get that one.
It is. And, but I think the education today is broadened so much due to the internet and all the social media, and people are more aware. And you don't have to take the first thing you see. There's a lot of different variables to look at. But when we would take those street horses and put them to work, not only did we pick a nice mount that we knew, and then once we decided to try that horse, we had a 30-day window at the barn where we would put those horses through every pace we wanted them to do, which meant we rode them at the barn. We simulated some of the crowd control. We did some of the sensory training. We'd ride them on the streets downtown or in Hollywood Boulevard. We'd take them to the beach. We'd acclimate them in that 30-day trial process to make sure that they're going to be halfway suitable. Now, we could help some situations if they needed some help in those areas, because those horses, a lot of times, were never around those elements. But we also determined that if that horse was not going to be solid, or maybe he just couldn't handle certain aspects of the job, we had to determine if we had a place for him. And we had such a need for good, solid horses that didn't rattle very easy. That's kind of what we looked at the most. So it was pretty interesting that we chose the horse that, even if we needed to help him, he could make the grade. But there's some horses that they're never going to be that type of horse for a police horse, but they can sure be good horses for something else.
Yeah. You know, I want to open up a can of worms about that topic right there, if you don't mind. And I'd love to hear from both of you on this, because this is something that I think, I don't know if I'd want to say plagues the equine world, but it sure is a hang up. You know, I'll get somebody to come to a clinic, and, you know, it's just really clear that they're not getting along with this animal. And it's no fault necessarily of the animals, and it's really no fault of the person. Sometimes it's just not a good fit. But you say that to them, and they're offended, like you offended Fluffy, you know, and like, how dare you say, you know, because they love this mule and they love this horse, and they, you know, don't want to break up. But, you know, you can clearly see, like, you know, and you guys have the same position as I do. We're pretty blessed because we can see things from a detached perspective, meaning,
Correct.
you know, I'm on the outside looking in, and this relationship isn't working, you know, and it's just not a good fit. Somebody says, well, I want this mule, for my kid, or, I want this mule for me to go do this or that on. And it's just not a
Well,
good fit. That's just reality sometimes. And you're saying
yeah.
that you found that, with the police force for sure. But
Sure.
that goes all around, and you can get good at horsemanship, and the people can work at it, and you can get the animal better, but sometimes it's just not going to fit.
Well, like Jerry said, they weren't for that job. They weren't a bad horse. They just
Yeah.
weren't suited for that job. And it's exactly like you said, they're just not a good fit for the human or the situation or, and it's nothing wrong about the person or the animal. It's just not, but we get the human emotion so attached to things right off the bat. Or, you know, we just had a call from a gal who had got a Mustang. And so she's, had it for a few months now, but it's still got the halter on. She can't figure out how to take it off and all this stuff. And, but she kept saying to me, and he's aged. He's an 8-year-old Mustang that's probably been in captivity for a few years, but really not super clear, never touched, or not really sure what his background is. But, and the same thing, she's had horses her whole life and all that. But she kept saying, oh, I know he's a good horse. I know he's a good horse. But I just can't, I need to have something that's safe and all this and be able to handle. And I'm thinking, to be blunt, I was thinking, how do you know it's a good horse? If you can't, if you can't touch it, you can't get the halter off. It's pulling its head away. You can't, and she kept saying how gentle it was and how it hasn't offered to kick her or any of that. I'm thinking, but if you put that horse in a scary situation, or you get more in depth with it and trying to get the halter off or get him cornered, he is going to kick you. He just hasn't gotten to that point. And I'm thinking, and so I kept trying to tell her, okay, so realistically what this looks like is, 6 months to get him gentle, at the minimum, to where she could take him home and probably handle him, get the halter on, catch him up, get his feet done, deworm, all that stuff, just the basics. But she kept telling me, oh, I love this horse and I want to give him a good home and he deserves it and all this stuff. And that's super nice to have those people to do it. But
it takes support.
It takes quite a bit to get them. And, I don't know. I'm a little more, Jerry's probably more of an optimistic than I am, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. And sometimes, but people have a hard time hearing it's not a good fit, basically. Right. So
people have a hard time hearing also that, hey, you know what? Somebody can make this horse or this mule, they can make it happen, but it's not you.
Well,
and that hurts, that does hurt.
Does.
It really does. I mean, and that kind of leads to, I think, something that gets in the way a lot. And I'd love to hear your comments on this too, is ego. I think ego is like number one, enemy number one when it comes to horsemanship and mulemanship. I mean, ego gets in the way, doesn't it?
Here's how I think today. And I really studied this. I studied this combination between the horses and the people and the mules and myself once I'm involved. Now, if I go on a ride somewhere and nobody's asking me for help, unless they're getting ready to get killed, I don't say nothing. I got no involvement at all, unless it's a safety issue. But once you've asked me to help you, I think my honest opinion is always going to be. So I think about, there's professions that you have to be skilled at, and you have to have a certain amount of understanding. Doctors, lawyers, firemen, policemen, whatever it might be, CPA workers, whatever it is. You've got the shingle, you've got their credential, and now you have the authority to say, look, I can help you with this problem. What I do is I take my program and I just like I structured for the police department. There was certain schooling that we went through, then there were certain criteria, and then there's a certain routine to do everything every day. Then you adjust to fit the situation. I think where we can help people, for me today, where I can help people the most, it is to let people know If you want to get along with this animal, you need to know what he does and why he does it. Then you need to know how to address that behavior and how you can get that into your idea as well as his. But I think putting it all on the table and schooling the people the most. When you talked about ego, I think ego is insecurity. So when someone boasts about something, or they're really, the more trouble, just like in the horses, the more trouble the person has, the more they need to know, or they seem to think they need to know. But if you will get to a point where you know very little and allow someone to help you, that's when we can make the change. And for me, I've always had that idea to do that. A real quick story: when I was at Bishop for a lot of years, there was a couple guys came from Oklahoma. Now, most of the guys in Bishop in these days, they got fancy trucks and trailers, and mules are shaved, and they got all this 9-yard stuff going. Well, these two old boys came in from Oklahoma. They unloaded these pair of mules, and they're going to just do the pulling contest. And these things looked like woolly bears. I mean, they had hair 3 inches long on them. You couldn't even pet them. These things were wild as a March hare. But I knew this guy knew something. I just had the feeling this guy's the real deal. And I'll tell you, that first introduction I had around Mr. Martin was, if he stopped, I ran into him. I wasn't being rude, but I was trying to listen or watch anything this guy had to say. I felt if he said something, it was going to be a gold nugget. So he was the kind of guy, simply, when you weigh mules at Bishop Mule Days for the pulling, the weight, because they don't pull on, they pull on percentage, where a horse contest is a dead weight pull, but the mules are percentage. You percentage your weight, that puts you in different classes. He was so clear about his pulling, he would take the halters off to take 2 pounds off of the weight when he went into weight for that. Anyway, I got to meet this guy a couple years of being around him. I really got to be good friends with him. And that mule I told you about that taught me the most valuable lessons that I could ever learn, he would drive really good when he wanted to. And I worked him hard. I hauled hay with him. I did everything I could do to get him ready for Mule Days. But I'd get him to Mule Days, and sometimes he would mess up. So this particular year, Mr. Martin had already pulled. He was sitting in the chair. I'd pulled. That mule just came apart. It was embarrassing, because I thought he would do pretty well. I tied him up, and I went over, and I can still see Mr. Martin sitting in that chair. I said, Mr. Martin, I know you know a lot about mules. I'd like to ask you a question. Is there any way you could help me get that mule better at pulling? He says, if you want to pull a mule, get a different mule. He went to Oklahoma. I go to California. Next year, we go to Bishop Mule Days. Mr. Martin's there. Jana Tindell's there. And I got a different mule. I still had that mule because he rode well and he did other things, but he wasn't a hitch mule. And Mr. Martin told me years after that, he said, you know what? People walk up to me every day and ask for my opinion, but you're the only fella I ever took it.
Well,
So
that's
you got
a
to
good
think
compliment.
about that. You got to think about that. If you really want someone's advice, or you want their input, at least consider it.
Oh, yeah.
Most people would say, I ain't getting rid of that mule. That mule's great. I can make him happen. Well, he wasn't making it when you was asking about the problem. So just be aware of how you can listen and be observant. It really helped me a lot.
Yeah. That's a cool story, Jerry. You know, it seems like in these relationships, there's really 3 entities. You got the equine, you got the human, and then you got the combination. And everything has to kind of come together to really make some serious progress. But what I was saying about ego earlier is, it hangs up a lot of people. Like, and there's definitely different, I guess we could say, different types of people, different genres of people, because here in Utah you get at least this rural area I'm in, it's very ego driven. If a guy has a horse or mule that they're not getting along with, I mean, a little bit of ego, I guess, maybe isn't terrible because it might keep them going. Like I can do this. So, we can get through this, and maybe a small dose of it is all right. I mean, it's the same thing like when I was rodeoing, riding broncs. Okay, let's face it, everybody that is rodeoing has a little ego at least, right? Or else why would you be out there trying to win, trying to ride, So a little bit of it might push you. But too much of it is dang sure dangerous, because I've seen some folks that, they don't want to give up on something, and only because they don't want to say they didn't, they give up.
Sure.
When really it's not a good combination. And or like you was just saying, on taking advice too. I mean, I'm the same as you. I'm only going to give advice if somebody asks for it. That's it.
Right.
Like, or like if they're about to die, I'll let them get pretty close to it, and then I'll pull them off the edge. But otherwise, and part of that too, I'm sure you found the same thing in your career, which is longer than mine, is, if you're telling somebody how to do stuff all the time, you run out of friends pretty quick.
You bet.
People don't want to ride with you if you're always just telling them what to do all the time. And so I've somebody gave me that advice a long time ago, and I've kept it, and actually drives some of my friends a little bit crazy, because they're like, why won't you just help me out with this? I'm like, well, do you want me to help you? Yes. Okay. Well, now I will. But until you ask me, I'm going to let you figure it out on your own, because I'm not going to butt in and ruin a friendship because I tell you something. And that kind of goes back to the ego too. I don't want to stomp on somebody's ego. That might be a good way to ruin things also. But yeah, it's an interesting situation that we're in sometimes as in our profession, I think.
Yeah, because it can be a waste of time and energy. It's like the old saying about paying a pig to sing. You annoy the pig and you waste your money.
So
I've never heard that, Jerry.
Because it ain't
I'm gonna be quoting you now.
There goes your reputation.
Hey, there's the gold nugget I've been waiting for.
I think to talk about with people and their personalities, just to chime in on that a little bit, it's pretty and like you mentioned, Jerry, and you both, you don't really say anything to people because you don't want to hurt those feelings, or you don't want to ruin relationships. And it probably took a while to figure that out, and I'm pretty thankful for Jerry to help me figure that out, because it's tough. You want to help because you think you want to help people and you want to help them get better, but if they're not in that spot, then and what the neatest thing is to watch Jerry with people that are like that, because he just kind of gives them things to do, like, okay, well, that's great, well, show me this. And he's really I don't want to say it's not sly, but he's very good with being able to, like, basically let you might need a little help, but he never tells them that, hey, look here, you dingus, you're not doing that right, but he doesn't do that. He just says, okay, that's good, well, why don't you try this, or how can you show me how you do this, or and he never makes people, from what I see, that have that. And I think that's why he is so successful with the people, is because he doesn't butt heads with people with the ego, because he doesn't, where I want to tell these people sometimes, and I'm learning, because that's not the right way to do. Tell them they're wrong.
If you think about it, we're trying to teach our stock something. And I just thought about this while Miss Jana was talking, but we all go through it. I went through it. I look back and I've done things and I'm thinking, man, that was the craziest thing in the world to do. But at that moment, I thought, hey, this is what I need to do. But if you have folks that are in your corner that you believe in, that will help you and guide you and be there to help you, just take a moment to take that. And, a real quick story about riding. How many times, just like you noticed, the old saying is, green on green make black and blue. If that was my animal, I wouldn't ride him, would you? Now, with that being said, I was in the same predicament. I was hanging around the Santa Anita racetrack shoeing horses with those guys, and I wasn't licensed on the track to shoe, but I hung around with all those people. And I met a guy that was a boxer. And I used to box a little bit as a kid, and from a big family, you know, we scrapped and we wrestled and we tugged and fought. I mean, I was somebody. I was pretty tough in those days, and I could hold my own. So I meet this guy on the racetrack. He says, "Hey, I found out he was a boxer." I said, "I've always had a huge interest in that. I'd like to take some boxing lessons." So he gets me all set up. He says, "You need to get your mouthpiece, get your bags, get your gloves, get your wraps, and meet me at this location." So I show up. Now I'm shoeing horses. I'm riding 3 or 4 a day. I'm packing. I mean, I'm busy and I'm athletic and I'm fit. So it's kind of like telling a person, you might want to do groundwork before you get on your horse. So I show up at this guy's gym and he says, "Okay, you need to start running. You need to do push-ups, sit-ups. You need to work the heavy bag. You need to work the." I said, "Hey, look, I mean, I shoe horses all day long. I'm riding horses. I want to box." He said, "No, you really need to do your homework and you get your footwork. You're going to get your air up." So 2 days of this, he says, "All right, you want to box?" So he wrapped my hands. He put gloves on. He said, 3 3-minute rounds. I'm ready. I knew how to jump up and down. I knew how to hold my hands. And so he whistles at this kid over there working on the heavy bag, and little kid about, I don't know, he looked like he weighed 90 pounds. I'm thinking, this is going to be like shooting fish in a barrel. That kid come in that ring, that bell rang, and I don't know where he was because he must have been 10 feet from me, but he hits me. So I get my hands ready. I protect my head, and he hits me in the rib cage. I can't even see this guy. I don't even know where he's at now. He's just banging on me with them gloves. The first round, I got pretty tired, and I also got pretty serious. So second round, here we go. I don't know. It must have been 2 seconds because we're back at it again. Well, here comes this kid banging and pushing and bumping. And I'm thinking, I don't see these things. I don't know where it's coming from. And he's just boxing my ears off. The second round, my mouth was pretty dry and I could hardly breathe. We got one more round to go, and I don't know how I'm going to make it. So we get the third round bell going, and my arms were so tired I couldn't pick them gloves up. I had to hold this kid to keep him from hitting me. I didn't know any other way to survive. And after that, I clumb up and I had to go underneath them ropes. I couldn't go over them. I sat down, and after an hour of recouping and thinking, I went over and said, "Sir, I'd like to practice."
Yeah.
So that's a lesson that I learned in that situation. Now, he didn't hurt me. That he put that kid in there for a purpose. I mean, they could have just knocked me out with one punch. But I thought I knew a little something. And going into that with that type of thought, man, I was way over my head. But those lessons in life that we go through, we need to remember those and think, hey, I got to be a little better prepared in some of these endeavors I go through. But I ended up being a pretty good boxer, but I had to do all the things he said I had to do prior to getting saddled and get on.
Yeah. You know, you can use that story and apply it as an analogy for so many, pretty much everything in life, everything in life, because, you know, it's interesting, you know, somebody will call and say, you know, I have a mule that doesn't back up very good, or my horse doesn't trailer load. And they want an answer for that specific problem, like as if there's one thing. Oh, do this thing right here and it fixes it. Or here's this tool, you know, hand me a screwdriver, hand me a hammer. Yeah. But really, you know, and you probably found this, Jerry, is the farther you get in your own education, like me, the farther I get my education, the more I'm like, well, hold on, let's just go way back to the beginning and let's just see what's missing in there, because there's pieces missing in there.
Sure.
But it's not just a quick fix, you know. And I don't know about you, but it seems like the more I learn, the harder it gets for me to answer simple questions. What I mean is kind of like what I just said, is like, well, where do I start? You know?
Yeah.
Okay. How was your attitude when you walked out to catch your mule? I mean, it can, I mean, you know, like, hold on. what side of the bed you wake up on, right?
Yeah.
Like, it goes back to so many things that can influence, so many things can influence, a moment of time. It's really amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive today to listen to people and to watch and to be able to be helpful and be simple. Like Miss Jana says, I don't butt heads with nobody, and I don't say anything bad or say anything indifferent. I just give them some structured things to think about, and then it's up to them to practice those things, and that gives them the answer they're searching for. If I give them the program and say, hey, you say your mule doesn't back up, so well, let's get him to move and let's do this and do that, and the next thing you know, he will back up. So like you said, you got to come about it from the beginning. You got to give them some footsteps to go through and some things to practice. And that, I never tell anybody they're wrong. I just say, well, just show me what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to go about it.
Doesn't hurt their feelings.
Well, and if somebody's pretty sincere about wanting to learn, then we should be super supportive, and we have their back, and I want them to know that
Sure.
we are sincerely here to help. And I say that at the beginning of all my clinics. I say, you guys, I want you to know I'm sincerely here to help you.
Yeah.
I'm here. I want you to succeed. I want you to be the best that you can be, and your mule, your horse, to be the best they can be. And some of your perspective right there reminds me a lot of some of the things that I've heard about Tom Dorrance. Now, I never got to meet him. I wish I would have, but I have tried to get my hands on everything he ever wrote, everything that was ever filmed of him, every home video, every article written about him. I mean, I've just researched that guy as much as I possibly could to this point. And, it sounds like he did a lot of the same things that you kind of do, Jerry. You just set it up for them and try to help them, I've never heard anybody say a negative word about Tom Dorrance.
No, you
Pretty much
couldn't.
every other horseman in the whole world I've heard negative things about,
Sure.
but never about Tom Dorrance. Did
But
you get to be around him?
I was around Tom just a little bit, just because I was involved with Larry Mahan for a while.
Yeah.
And when I was working for the mounted unit at that time, Larry Mahan hosted a program called I forgot what it is, what it was exactly. But anyway, they came to the mounted unit to do a deal on our horses. So I really I knew Larry from the rodeo industry, but had never met him or been around him. But he shows up and we hit it off pretty well. He says, hey, if you ever want to come up to my place to spend a week, he says, I'd like to have you help me with some students, and we'll just have a good time. And I had a couple of bosses who were really good about letting me do those things. So I got to go to Larry Mahan's ranch in Colorado for a week. So I spent some time with him, and then I got in that situation. I got to hang around with Tom. But to tell you how Tom thinks, it was probably the most special thing that made him who he was. And he did things so simple. I remember he was working a Mustang horse one time in an around pen, and there was a lady there, and Brian Newbert was there helping Tom. And Brian was in the round corral, and they had the horse haltered, had the rope on the outside of the round corral, and he was going to have this lady hold the rope, and he wanted Brian to get behind the horse and just walk back and forth with the flag, because the horse had some issues switching eyes. So he tells this young lady, he says, now there's a pair of gloves in that chair. I'd like you to put those gloves on. So she picks up the gloves and she puts them on. And Tom says, you're going to see there's some tape on the right thumb of that glove. On the thumb, I wrapped tape around that. He says, you might think there's a hole in that glove. He said, there's no hole there. He said, it got thin and I put the tape on. See, that's how he thought. He thought in such deep thought processes of, don't wait till it's got a big hole in it, fix it. Let's do something while it's getting a little bit wore, and we can save it a little bit longer. So that's kind of how he thought, and was so quiet and so easygoing. And he just had so much knowledge about stuff that he didn't even know. He did it so naturally. And the stories are just endless about how he impressed so many people and so many things in just that thought process. And he was just so quiet, but he was just a genius as well. He thought different than anybody else.
Yeah. Who were some of your other influences in your horsemanship and your mulemanship up to this point? Like who has, I mean, you mentioned your dad, and I'm sure you learned a lot, you know, growing up, just being around that type of culture and that deal. But who else has influenced you?
Well, growing up through the horse industry, you know, especially the horseshoe, and I got to hang out with some horseshoers that I knew that were really high on the chain as far as educational people. But then in the horsemanship part of it, at Bishop Mule Days, I got to hang out with a lot of, a lot of guys in the early days that were competing and winning. Chamberlain, oh, I forget a lot of the names now, but I learned a lot from those guys. But the horsemanship, I started to get involved in. Mike Baker was a big influence for me. He was a performance horse trainer here in Burbank, California. I rode with Mike quite a while. I got to hang out with Tom a little bit just through Larry Mahan. But I've also studied, I'm a big student of Ray Hunt. I got to hang out with Ray quite a bit, not near as much as I wished I would have, but I really learned a huge foundational thing from Ray because he did the same thing every day, the same exact thing every day. He might mix it up, but it was exactly the same thing. He was such a stickler on getting these feet to do these certain things that it just stuck to me like glue. And I really appreciated that. But I rode with Buck Brenneman. I really like Brian Newbert. I've roped with Joe Walter. So I've been influenced with those guys that are the same kind of deal that Ray was. I like to study that style. And, but I gravitate to people that I really know they know what they're doing as far as my style. It's not that there's a lot of different styles you can go to, whatever is your thing, that's great. But for me, I liked what Ray talked about. I liked his philosophy and his approach to life, and fix it simple, turn it loose, release it, reward it, and go again. So that's kind of that circle of guys that I really study is, Ray, and I rode with Buck, Brian Newbert, Joe Walter. Those are, I think, the guys that really kept and still keep Ray's philosophy alive.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're mentioning style, or I guess you could say genre or type or whatever word you want to use, right? Because I've come to understand the same thing, that there's a lot of ways to do something with a horse and a mule.
Sure.
I mean, and there's really not one way that is, I guess the only way. But I one of my favorite quotes from Tom Dorrance is that you have to treat the mule the way you should treat the horse. And I really like that. And the age old conversation, people that just don't know what they don't know, a stubborn mule, right? You hear that. And when you dig a little deeper into these people's lives, a lot of times you learn they've never actually even rode a mule. So they just repeating as a parrot what they've heard. But the people that have worked with some mules and maybe didn't have a lot of success with it, you start digging a little deep into how they approached some of the things. And my favorite thing about the teachings like that you teach, and people like Tom Dorrance and Ray Hunt and others you mentioned, is making the right thing easy. And I think that's where people run into the most trouble with mules, is when they're trying to just make it happen.
Sure.
And they get that shutdown mode of the mule, and the ignorant or the naive, whatever word you want to use, calls it stubborn. So I think that's probably my favorite lesson from people like Tom Dorrance and things that I've picked up on. What's your take on that?
I agree with you 100%, but here's my simple philosophy on what I apply today and try to believe in and teach. But you have to have the basics. So people say every day, I can't get my horse in the trailer. Well, we know that's a leading problem. And you mentioned the statement that everybody talks about. And they say, make the right thing easy and the wrong thing difficult. But if you don't know what that is, how in the world are you going to do that? If you don't know what the right thing is, you can work on that till the cows come home, and that's not going to happen. So if we learn to go to the basics, that's what I liked about Ray Hunt so much, because his horsemanship classes were just, he could get so much out of a horse and a student that neither one of them knew anything, because he would have them do the same thing every ride down the arena, make a half a turn to the left, go the other way, move the hindquarters, move the front quarters, do a circle, go away, keep him soft, keep the feet cadence, keep the rhythm, keep the balance. And he talked about it day in and day out. And that's what I locked onto the most. But for people to misunderstand that, I think it just gets in our way. But that philosophy is something that we can believe in and apply today.
Yeah. I mean, I just apply that to pretty much anything I want to do with the mule. I just apply that idea. How can I make it easier to do this? But yeah, you're right. If you don't know the steps to make it easy, okay, well, let's just grab the whip and get him in the trailer. Like, that's all I know. All right.
Yeah. I know I was at a deal one time, and this gal runs up to the booth. I'd already done everything, and we're just kind of talking, and she runs up. She says, "Man, I'm so glad to meet you, and I'm so glad to help you." And she says, "I've got this mule, and I want you to help me, and I know he's different, and I know you." I said, "Ma'am, the first thing is your mule's not any different than the horse." I said, "He eats the same food, goes in the same trailer. Do you have a horse trailer or a mule trailer?" So I'm just kind of talking her through some of this basic stuff, and her husband's in the background going, "Yeah, that's what I've been trying to tell her." But I don't treat them any different. But I'll tell you that there are some differences. Just like people, when I do a class, I go in that arena and everybody is the same, and then I make adjustments in a very kind and thorough way. I make adjustments to fit all of these situations. So people ask, what's the difference between a horse and a mule? There are no differences, but they do things differently. You take a colt that you've raised in your house, your barn, he's been blanketed, he's had his feet done, he's been pretty good to be around. You take him to a hitch rail and it's time to put a saddle on him, and you tie him up and put a saddle on, you cinch him up, and he feels that cinch that he's never felt before. He panics, he pulls back, breaks the lead rope, and now you have a colt that is cinchy and has a pullback problem. That horse will probably do that every day you take him to the hitch rail. You do that to your young mule, you hitch rail, groom him, saddle, pad, saddle, cinch, he panics, he pulls back, he breaks the rope. You have the same thing that you had with your colt. The only difference is you won't get that mule back to the hitch rail. See, the horse will go to the hitch rail time and time again and make the same mistake. The mules, they won't do that. Once they get a situation where they're really clear they're not going to go, they're going to be very hard to convince. So like you said, it's a huge education for us and the mules, because we really have to think, okay, what's going on before I continue to push this thing and see what's going to happen. That mule that I talked about that taught me so much, I had him where this thing, boy, he'd go up a tree and through a knothole. This mule could ride, boy, and I had a handle on him. But I always pushed him a little more. I didn't know in those days. We're riding in the high country. We come off the mountain into a big old meadow, and I mean, it's beautiful. Everybody stopped. We can't get them to go. They won't go through that timber and all that green grass. I said, "Get out of the way. I got one will go." Mine didn't want to go either. "Oh, I can get him." Well, I finally pushed him up, and he stepped into that grass. We sunk clear to the saddle horn. He tried to tell me that ain't the best place to go, but I thought, well, we'll make it. But I started listening to him after that.
That's awesome. you know, like you get that question a lot. What's the difference, right, between horses and mules? I mean, that's probably, top 5 most commonly asked questions for me, right? And it's just like anything else. I've never been asked what are the similarities between horses and mules. Right. That list is long, right? Mm-hmm, I mean, there's so many similarities, and I think that's interesting. But anyways, like that conversation, Jerry. I appreciate your insight on that. You know, I just wrote this down. There's no differences, but they do things differently. I like that. I like
Well,
that.
you know, in the mule, what makes the biggest influence, and again, the breeding. When I was a little boy, the breeding was more like, you know, you got a mare that doesn't produce good horse calls. Well, breed them, get a mule. So that was some of that old thought process. But today they're breeding some really nice stuff to really nice stuff. Like Tucker Splinter, a good friend of mine that shows in Bishop for many, many years. He bred and brought a mule to Bishop that was really well bred out of some cow breeding. And her name was Donkalina. You know, Donkalina is a big name in the horse world. So he named her
I remember
Donkalina.
the mule.
But I'll tell you what makes the difference is how much donkey you get in your mule. The old timers told me, if you can work a horse, you're pretty good. If you can work a mule, you're a little better. If you can work the donkey, you're really good.
Yeah.
And we know that it takes a donkey 1 hour and a half to watch 60 minutes of TV. They are slow. So, and you're not going to make that happen. So it depends on how much donkey you get, and then how much horse influence you get. So it is interesting how you have that combination.
Yeah, it is. You know, and when people talk about mule, people don't really talk about horses nearly as general as they talk about mules. You know, when you talk about horses, well, what breed? You know, well, okay, then you narrow down a breed, and then you narrow down bloodlines. You know, these days you don't even say it's a quarter horse. No, it's all about bloodlines. And
sure,
you know, a racing quarter horse, totally different from a cutting quarter horse. I mean, they might as well be two different breeds at this point in history, right? But a lot of folks will say, "Oh, mule." Well, we could have all kinds of mules. I mean, we could, you know, and I've rode all kinds of mules, and they're totally different creatures depending on the breeding too, which is very interesting to me, you know. But yeah, but at the end of the day, they are all equine, and we can use our philosophy and our work on that and do the best we can. So,
and that breeding program is important. The best mule I ever owned was he was out of Oklahoma by truck. That was his pedigree.
Jen, I hope you write all these things down. You need to get.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm getting to be
we'll call the book Words of Jerry.
Yes. Well, you know, I came up with that deal. I was at a show one time, and this guy had this horse, and he just couldn't get along with this horse. It just wasn't working very good. But he attempted to tell everybody a 5-page summary of how this thing was bred. I mean, he knew every bloodline and every name, all of these numbers. And finally, somebody looked at me and says, "That mule you got's pretty good. What's the pedigree on that thing?" I said, "He's out of Oklahoma by truck." They thought that was the funniest thing they ever heard. The old boy with the horse didn't like it, but it was pretty funny.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. That's interesting. So Jana, I've been neglecting you for a minute.
No.
How did you come into this picture? Did you start riding with Jerry and tell us about that a little bit?
So I grew up down in Southern California, and I was fortunate to have horses, you know, typical. We boarded them for a long time, and you know, so just trail rode, did gymkhana, took some riding lessons when I was little and things like that. But my mom got a young horse when I was like, I don't know, 13 or so, and we ended up, I don't even remember how she ended up going to the clinics with Jerry, but that's how it all, we came up, she started going to clinics with him and doing a program, and she was, very nice and drug me along to all of them and put me in some of them at a young age, and I didn't know, and but that's how we first met Jerry. And then I've always had horses, and I had one horse for a long time that was pretty troubled, and I got bucked off a lot. And I mean, it was bad. I think about her all the time because I mean, she was cinchy and she pulled back and she I mean, I remember we were riding on the side of a hill and she tooted and scared herself and then went straight to bucking. And, and I didn't know how to ride. I mean, stuff like that. And, but then when I was in my, when I started really getting back into it, and we talked earlier about the ego and stuff. And one of the biggest lessons I had, so that mare that I had, I kind of got to a point where I was like, okay, this is enough. I'm tired of, it's not fun anymore. It sucked the life out of when you're getting dumped all the time, or you can't even get a saddle on. It's not fun. That's not fun to ride. And, it wasn't my life it was my life, but it wasn't my livelihood. And when you go and you have a couple hours to ride, you don't want to have to, you don't want you're forced to pull back every time or buck or all that anyway. So I got more serious about it. And this horse that I had, she actually ended up hurting herself real bad from pulling back. And I will never forget my veterinarian at the time. He's like, you got three options here, basically. He's like, you can let the horse be and maybe find a pasture and see how she does, basically, she tore a tendon and it was just she was never going to come back from it. And he's like, but he said those words, he's like, but you're not a trainer and you're not gonna be able to handle her in this situation. Cause I couldn't even give her a shot. I couldn't, it was getting pretty bad and stuff, but those words, I'll never forget it. You are not a trainer. And it was just like a knife to the heart. And, it was just, it was like, oh my God, I'm not a trainer, and because I didn't know. And I look back now, I don't know. I still don't know anything, but I did not know anything. And so I got pretty serious after that. And then I got another young horse and that thing put me through the ringer too. And then that's when I really started getting a lot of help from Jerry. And he was living in Northern California at the time. So I went up there quite a bit. And then it just kind of worked out. He offered me a job, basically, a little bit of work for trade, for education. And then it just kind of grew from there. And so that's almost 8 years ago now. So, I started out just working and helping him and trade and things like that. And then it just kind of morphed into more. And here we are today. So,
living the dream.
Living the dream. Heck yeah. It's
go ahead.
Well, just, and it's fine. I don't mind it, but I get stuck. I don't want to say stuck, but I do a lot more of the office work, right? I'm better at it. I've had more experience growing up in technology. I mean, I've had technology in my life, my whole life, right? So, but
I mean, Jerry, he, when he was around, it was Pony Express days. So,
yeah.
Stuff has changed, Jerry.
Yeah. Where you talk on the phone with holding it up to your ear and you got the microphone. Yeah.
Yeah. Jen, have you ever asked Jerry what Abraham Lincoln was like?
Yeah. No.
I taught him how to ride.
Yeah.
Well, you find in relationships, you find your strengths and everything, and you pick up the weight where you can. And it's the same thing for me and Sky. Sky does all the social media stuff.
Yeah, she does a good job.
Social media is hard for me because I think of all the things I could be doing. Correct. But she has lots of friends and she has family that's spread out all over the place, and so she's already on there. And so she can just pick up and do that, where I would rather be out working on something else. Correct. Or, I do all the website stuff and all the video editing and these podcasts and this type of deal. And she's like, I don't want none of that,
Yeah.
So
well, that's why I was trying to, getting at is like all that stuff weighs me down sometimes because I get cranky, because I don't want to do it. I want to ride horses for a living and all that, but unfortunately it's a necessary part of the job. But I am truly fortunate to do what we get to do because you're looking at I grew up in the city, and even when we lived in the rural areas, we still are, not in the rural part, and we had horses, and just like a lot of our clients, we work, we have our lives, and we do all that. So I'm very fortunate to know to be able to do what we get to do, even though I have to do the book work or the other stuff, because I mean, I can go out and ride if I want to, or we got, I get to do some of the breeding now. We have babies, and we have hogs that we raise. We do a bunch of other stuff, and it's truly a blessed life to be able to do what we get to do. So
yeah, that's really cool. I think a lot of people don't recognize everything it takes to do, well, you could apply it to pretty much any business, I mean,
correct.
anything you just don't know what's behind the scenes going on to make that world go round, and
Yeah.
but we sure appreciate what you do, Jen, and I'm glad you're getting social media going so we can actually see what Jerry does. And
I know.
I liked your video the other day about you had that big what do you call it, that
Floppy man.
yeah,
The flopping man, yeah.
that flopping man, yeah.
The flopping man, yeah, that's what we call it. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty
Well,
fun.
we're in the works of doing that. So we're trying to, we're always looking for help, and the editing is super time consuming, as right? And it's really difficult to give people videos and have them edit if they don't know the program, right? If they don't know or see.
Yeah, they don't know what they're looking at. They don't know.
Exactly.
So you can't just hire somebody
No.
to edit your videos, because, they'll see you, like, you work on something and you're letting a mule or a horse kind of soak a little bit and letting them think about it. And you're about to talk about their expressions and them kind of going through that process. But an editor, and this happened to me. This is why I'm saying it is the editor says, "Oh, I cut out all that stuff between this and this." I'm like, "No, that's
the goal.
that's the learning. Why would you do that? Oh, sorry, man, it just was boring." I'm like, to you, because you don't know. That's the gold, So it is hard. You have to do that stuff yourself. Good thing about like making videos with mules and horses is, for the most part, it's a start and stop on the educational videos. Like, just start it and stop it. You don't really have to do much. The editing that really bugs me, and this way Sky does the social media, is okay, well, we want a 30-second clip for Instagram. That's Instagram, Jerry, not Telegram, Instagram.
Yeah.
And it's a thing in the interwebs. But anyways, that kind of stuff, and then Sky will add music to it or words to it, whatever. And that stuff is that's definitely up her alley for sure. So, well, we're glad you do that, Jana. Something I wanted to ask you about before we run out of too much time here is you're involved in that Missouri Mule Makeover a few years back. What that was in 20 or 21?
Sure. I did both. I signed up for both. So 2020 was the first year. Then I did 21, but I ended up getting hurt, so I didn't finish it because I had one leg. So, but yeah, in 2020 I did it. And I talked earlier about my little red mule Maverick. He was the one that I did it with in 2020. So Jerry talks about his mule that was real tough, that didn't pull and all that, and taught him a lot of education. Well, that's basically what Maverick is for me. I couldn't ask for a better teacher, because he's pretty tough. But without him, I probably wouldn't be as where I'm at today. That's for sure. It's really the whole process. It's been over the last couple of years with him has been an amazing journey, for lack of better words.
Cool. Yeah, I enjoyed watching you. Your stuff that you did there and all that. That was kind of neat. I did that Missouri Mule Makeover in 2019, I think.
The first.
Year. I had a handful too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, but they wouldn't even now they show the placings of everybody, which is really cool. But when I started, they said, nope, we're just announcing the winner. That's it. So you're either first or last, which is how I live anyways. If you ain't first, you're last, right? Ricky Bobby. So
well,
anyways, but they didn't even place me. But even if they would have placed, I was probably last.
Yeah.
I
Well,
felt
it's
so
funny
bad.
you say that because we had a meeting about that, right? So before while you're in Missouri at the event, they have a trainers meeting where everyone goes and they talk about the weekend and what's going to happen. And they said that in the years past, we've always done just first place, and we all chose to do placings. So the year in 2020 when I did it, they placed us all, and I did come in dead last. And I
Dang
mean,
it.
I can't
Never
even
mind. Let's
tell
just go
you.
back to first place only.
Yeah. No, and like I don't
We don't want to know.
know. I don't have a problem with it because you know what? If I didn't have that little mule, and if I didn't, I would be in the same spot. I think about that with all the tough horses. Like when I first started working for Jerry and I was going up all the time, what happened is I got a young horse. I didn't know any better, and I got a really bad concussion. I mean, that thing put me in the hospital. Like to this day, I don't even know what happened. But without that horse, I'm very lucky it wasn't worse. I would have never been pushed past where I was at. I would have been staying the same. And it's the same thing with with Maverick, is that without him, and you have the easy ones, you don't, in my opinion, you don't learn as much. And I mean, I gotta be thankful to Jerry here because he's really stuck by me and with all this stuff. And he kept telling me before that event, before the makeover, it's not good enough. He's like, you need to get better. You got to get deeper. And I'm like, no, I think he's all right. I think he's doing fine. And he was hanging together and all this stuff. But when we got to that event, he sure enough said, here's your sign, you know. He didn't hang together. And it was the most embarrassing, you know, because you think, oh, I work for Jerry Tindell and I know, and you know, I do this every day and yada yada yada, and I can. And then you go out there and I couldn't even get my mule from not running off and keeping his head up in the air. And it was just, I mean, I was pretty fit to be tied and I was emotional. And Jerry's just like, hang in there, you can do it. And I literally was ready to go home. And he was like, nah, stick it out, stick it out. And I did, and we didn't do well. And I just did what I could the rest of the weekend with him. You know, we made it through, but
we all go through it, just like I did with my boxing deal.
Yeah.
You know, it's taken me a lot of years to become the sterling figure you see before you today.
Yeah, Jerry.
It didn't happen overnight.
That's right. That's right. You know,
but I tell you,
go ahead, Jerry.
Same for people and horses. What I've really learned to apply today is just enough challenge to get them to feel better, but not to be discouraged or get hurt. Yeah. And that's quite a balance that I'm really good at, and I'm very aware of it. And people in the horses that I work, they don't even really understand that I'm taking them to that level because there's so much timing and release and things I've learned how to do and learned how to wait. And like you said, watch the expression and those sort of things. So I'm really excited today in my education where I'm at, and I feel pretty blessed to have had that opportunity. You know, I shod horses, I had to shoe with foot ropes. I had to tie their legs up. I had horses, I tied the legs up, and it was crazy. And there's so much I've learned along the way, and there's so much more I want to learn, but it's a pretty neat journey.
It is. It's a journey, and we're learning all the time. But yeah, Jana, a lot of those situations can be very humbling, you know, for sure, in all aspects, you know, and kind of goes back to what we was talking about earlier about ego, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's for sure. Even you know, for me, it was tough. You know, when I did that year, earlier that year, that's when I had won that national title. So I come off of winning a national title. And then I had all kinds of trouble with it, you know, and I didn't necessarily have any big, you know, any big moments at the makeover show, like showing the mule. We just weren't, you know, nearly the caliber that the other mules were at. And it is humbling, and you got to, you know, set that ego aside but you also learn from it too, you know, and you say, well, you know, and I think that is, you know, I'm not big in showing. I don't show. I really don't. I mean, Bishop is as much as I had ever shown, and maybe some of these other small mule days and things. So, I'm not a showman of any kind. But when you go to some of those things and you do kind of throw your hat in the ring,
Yeah.
boy, it does push you, and you go, wow, well, I got some things to work on. And I might be weird. I am weird. I know that.
No.
But I kind of like being uncomfortable. And I think that goes back to, that's what pushed me when I was rodeoing, riding broncs. I like that little edge of discomfort, well, even these podcasts, I invite guests, here I am talking to Mr. Jerry Tindell and Jana, I mean, all these things can be intimidating, but I kind of like it. I kind of
Yeah.
like being on that edge just a little bit. And I feel like I'm, that's definitely a blessing for me to kind of like that, but that's how we get better. You put yourself in those situations and you push a little bit. And the clinics are the same thing. I totally feel for all the participants that show up to a clinic, because well, day one is always a little bit of a cluster, because they show up, they're nervous, and their animals are usually nervous because of that, and all these new things. And so I always commend people, thanks for pushing yourself. It's good to push yourself.
Yeah.
Martin Black says, there's what does he say? There's no what is it? There's no comfort in the growth zone and no growth in the comfort zone.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
that's
kind of like that.
it's definitely the case. And I mean, I'm very thankful to have Jerry as, not only my husband, but my mentor and everything, because he pushes me out of that, because I probably would stay more in my comfort zone without someone there helping me along, or no, got to get a little better, got to do a little bit more, because it's very easy to stay where you are comfortable. And that's why I like showing, is because it pushes me to be better. Like,
Yeah.
because I'm not super competitive in where I want to win against everyone else. I want to do the best I can do, but there is a small part of me that wants to win for sure. I mean, and so I want to be, it helps me be better for my animals, horses and mules alike, and the donkeys, but it also helps me grow and have those experiences. And it's, I mean, we talk so much about how blessed we are, because, as you know, could you imagine doing anything else? Like, we're so fortunate to do what we get to do every day.
Yes.
Pretty neat life.
Absolutely.
But
well, I appreciate you guys. At the end of all my guest episodes, I ask my guests if they could give one word of advice, one piece of advice to, people just kind of going down this road of life. It can be advice about mules, horses. It can be just life advice, but I'd like you both to chime in on that. And we'll put Jerry on the spot first. Jerry, what's the word of advice you could give these people going down the road of life today?
Well, there's two parts of it. One is we need to be observant. We need to remember, and then we need to compare. And the other thing that I like to think about the most, and this applies to everything I do, is to know what you want, know how to ask for it, and know when you get it.
Good stuff, Jerry. Those are good things. Heck yeah.
well,
Miss Jana, how about you?
all my years of experience. No.
Hey,
kidding.
Yeah, you've lived life. You've lived life.
And we might lose Jerry after I say this.
I'm out of here.
He might fall right off his chair. But you have to find, we have to have help from everybody. And we're not going to be able to do it on our own without some guidance and someone with more experience and knowledge. And even if it hurts, you got to listen to them, because they've been there, they've done it, they've listened, and that's how we all get better.
Oh yeah. That's good, Jana. I gotta totally agree with everything there because, I'm here in the mountains, right? And there's a lot of people that are like, kind of mountain man people. They go
Mhm.
off and they want to live all by themselves. And it sounds kind of romantic, kind of cool, but I don't think that's why we're here. We're not
No,
here to be alone. We're
no.
not here just to go be a mountain man and, live in the backwoods and not talk to anybody. We're here to help and be helped. And sometimes being a blessing to somebody else is letting them help you,
Mhm.
and that's something that's hard for me is to let somebody help me sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good stuff, Jana. Absolutely. Well, you guys, thank you both so much for doing this for me and being on the show and everything.
Well, thank
I'm sure you're
you.
going to just take my ratings out the roof. Everybody's
Oh,
going to be
well,
so
good.
happy to hear from you.
But once we catch on board and we can get some of this stuff, we might have to go and we'll have to have you. Well, we would like you to come and do some stuff with us too. And
Yeah.
uh, once we catch up to the 24th year here,
Pond
Mhm.
casting.
pond casting, yeah,
Podcasting.
we'll have to catch up. But
That's right.
yeah,
Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. And yeah, you guys, I hope you have a awesome day and catch up on all your administrative work and then maybe get some time to hang out together. So,
yeah,
Well, we
anyways,
sure thank you. And I want to make a comment about how much I appreciate what you do and your compassion to, helping the mule industry and the people, and also the steps that you're taking to progress into some finalized versions of the bridal mule and learning to get people, helping people learn how to get to those goals. So we appreciate what you do and appreciate you as a family man, and we just really like what you do. And thank you so much for inviting us to be with you today.
heck yeah, Jerry, Jana, thank you guys both. And
you.
you guys are listening to the podcast. We'd love to hear from you as well. So if you have time, after you listen to this, be sure to give us a review. Tell us what you think. Leave us 5 stars because Jerry and Jana deserve it. And yeah, tell us what you think, you guys. And you can always send your comments to me, Ty at tsmules.com. But thanks so much for listening, you guys. God bless you all. And we will see you down the road.